Welcome, beloved sound seekers and vibra angels and frequenciers. Glad to have you back with me on this part 3 of the secrets to sound therapy and the healing with the ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, sitting right under our noses. As I talked about in the last video, part 2, last week or a few days ago, we talked about the power of the human voice because it's alive. It's the only instrument that we have that's literally alive. And therefore, it's connected to our body, it's connected to our soul and spirit. And so there isn't anything that can compare with the human voice. We can, use acoustic instruments to get some benefits, but as I talked about in the last video, the research from years ago that I share with people and that attend my workshops, I share some of the research that shows the effectiveness of sound in the order of the most effective down to the least effective. And number one, and with the most efficacy and benefits, nothing even comes close, is the human voice. And then a distant second, which means it's only about 1/3 as effective as the human voice, are acoustic instruments. Acoustic instruments that have to be tuned to your personal signature frequency. And you can easily obtain that through a diagnostic sound analysis. But without a diagnostic sound analysis, you're just shooting in the dark. You don't really know what frequencies to use. And so that's why it's vitally important to do a diagnostic sound analysis, either live in person with a certified sound therapist or over the phone. The first 15 years of my practice, I didn't do them over the phone or any way other than live because I didn't trust the technology. I'm not a tech person, and I just did it live. But then I found a really, really good Panasonic phone and microphone that really reproduced the voice perfectly. So for the last, I've been doing this since 1992. I opened the first sound therapy center in Southern California at that time, 28 years ago. And so I guess it's been about, if I started around 15 years later, so I guess it's about 13 years ago, roughly, I started doing them by phone when I got this good phone and microphone. So, my schedule is crazy. I talked about that last week too, that I do sound analysis in Europe and in Asia and every state, every city and state in the United States. And so it keeps my schedule kind of hopping. I never know if I'm sleeping in the daytime or the nighttime because in Europe, they're about 8 or 9 hours ahead of us. So I oftentimes are doing them around midnight or 1 or 2 in the morning. And then in Asia, they're like 13 or 14 hours ahead of us. And so with those, I'm oftentimes doing them by phone at 3, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. So this is important to be of service to people in need. And so I'm happy to sacrifice a little sleep time, but I make up for it. Sometimes I catch, naps in the daytime. It's kind of hard, but whatever. I work my schedule around the needs of the people. And I'm very grateful to be given this karma and this service to perform. I live to give, and I'm passionate about sound therapy, and I'm trying to reach all of you passionate people that are also loving sound and sound healing work. And so before I get into our topic today, we talked about the first 2 episodes of this series, which I'm going to be doing every week, every Saturday. We're going to shoot for like 6 p.m. Pacific Coast time every Saturday. And this is replacing the webinar I was doing on Tuesday, the second Tuesday of the month. It was just a monthly live webinar. But the service I was using was not too dependable. It was kind of difficult to use. A lot of people were having trouble accessing the mic and speakers and the camera and the code to get in for free and all this other stuff. And so the attendance was dwindling the last several months. So I've abandoned that. I'm not going to be doing the webinars on the second Tuesday anymore. Keep that in mind if you're one of the watchers. Instead, I'm doing these live video streams, and you can ask questions, you know, if you click on, I'm not too familiar with the technology, but I see a chat window here. If you have some questions, you can try and post them. And if it doesn't work, well, I'll find out more about the technology so that we can have some interaction together on future videos. So as I was starting to say, part one is very important, the principle of brainwave entrainment, which some people understand, but I've found over the years that most people don't understand brainwave entrainment. They think it's a scientific principle that you have to be versed in to understand. And it's really a simple principle. And so if you check out the video I did on my Facebook page, the Sound Therapy Center of Los Angeles, or on my timeline, Wayne Perry on Facebook, you can find it. I'm not sure if it's up on my website yet. We've had some problems. We have to change some of the login technical stuff on the back end of the website. So we've been a little delayed getting the last two videos up there, but they should be up by tomorrow or the next day if you want to check them out there. But in the meantime, you can check out all these videos on Facebook. And I do my calls. If you're interested in a diagnostic sound analysis, I do them usually on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger, because we can do it for free via the phone anywhere in the world. So keep that in mind. If you're in Russia, China, India, Taiwan, Japan, Australia, Europe, anywhere you're located, it's very easy to do it on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger for no cost. Of course, there's a cost for the diagnostic sound analysis, but we can discuss those things by email or by messenger if you want to contact me. And also my website is my name, wayneperry.com. If you haven't checked it out already, there's a wealth of information on wayneperry.com. You can go to the events page and see my upcoming schedule. It's kind of frozen right now with a couple of old things that have already passed. But by tomorrow or the next day, I said it should be updated with the upcoming, well, some of the upcoming events are there, like the workshop in May. The next weekend intensive sound healing workshop with certification is coming up May 30th and 31st. And some of the, like I say, the recent video links will be up. They're already on Facebook, but they'll be on the website by tomorrow or the next day. Anyway, as I was saying, the first in this series of videos is on the power of brainwave entrainment. It's over an hour long because it's some very, very important information. It's one of the best videos I've done, and at least in my opinion, and the feedback I've gotten, because it covers a lot of territory that people have questions about. So look for that at Wayne Perry, my timeline on Facebook, or in the Sound Therapy Center of Los Angeles. I've already posted it in various groups as well as on my pages. And then the second one I did just a few days ago, last week, was on the importance of prayer and invocation. And we also talked, that's one of the principles. And so today, the third in this series, we're going to talk about the power of attention and intention. These are very powerful principles to be used when used properly with sound therapy. Of course, it's important to do a diagnostic sound analysis with a certified sound therapist, either live or over the phone, to get the optimal results. But I want to go over these principles with you. Some of the other future principles we're going to be talking about is the principles of conscious breathing, inner listening, visualization, and also the power of commitment. Today we're going to be talking about the power of intention, which has been very popular for probably a decade or 2 decades. I know in the back in the 90s, I remember hearing Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer talking about intention a lot, and a lot of other people too. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with the power of intent and intention. So we're not going to spend too much time talking about that today, but I do want to frame it in the context of sound therapy, along with the power of attention and some of the other related principles. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and this is going to be a shorter video than the last two that ran about an hour. I'm going to be hopefully learning how to edit myself and keep these shorter and sweeter. So I realize we're all busy people on crazy busy schedules, and we don't always have time to sit and watch a video for an hour. And I'm taking that into consideration. Hopefully you can record it or know where it is and come back to it if you don't have time to watch the whole video, like the one on entrainment that I highly recommend that you watch. I might also mention, if you go to the video page on my website, wayneperry.com, there's about a dozen other webinars and videos that you can learn a lot from, and they're free to view. Presently, there's no charge for them. Down the road, I might have to charge something for it, but right now you can go on the video page and select from a dozen, live to tape videos and webinars that I've done over the past year or so, maybe even 2 years. Well, actually, there's one or two that's really dated, but that's very informative that I did at a conference. So anyway, you can explore the video page and see some of the topics and what interests you, but don't get fooled by the titles. The titles just kind of have one brief topic, and I usually get into a lot of related topics, so you can learn a lot about sound therapy and vibrational healing principles and practices by checking out the videos on wayneperry.com. And also keep in mind that my email and phone number are also on the website, wayneperry.com. A lot of people hide their emails and phone numbers, and it's hard to reach them. I try to be as accessible as possible, so I'm available for questions and comments about any of the things that I'm doing or anything in general that you want to discuss and talk about. And I also usually offer a 50-minute free sound healing phone consultation. If you haven't experienced that yet, you're welcome to call me for a free consultation. If some of these topics don't address your immediate concerns or needs, I can give you a free 50-minute phone consultation, answer any questions that you have. But if you schedule an appointment for a sound analysis, I can talk to you about the cost and the time involved and the scheduling times I'm available and that sort of thing. But anyway, getting to our topic of from attention to intention, starting with attention, because it's actually, even though this is the third in the series, on my list in my workshop, when I go over the 9 core key principles of sound healing, I usually start with this one. The one I did last week, the last video presentation I did on invocation, the importance of prayer and invocation and putting God first, and realize that all healing takes place within. It's nothing externally that's going to help you from the outside in. And I also talked about the 3 R's, the 3 types of sound: relaxing sound, release sound, and regenerative sound. And only regenerative sound is the true healing sound. So just as a quick review, relaxing sounds are things like listening to relaxing music or listening to environmental sounds like birds chirping or ocean waves. And then also, maybe new age music or soft jazz or sound baths. These are all under the category of relaxing sounds. And don't get confused by thinking that they're healing sounds, because there's nothing healing about relaxing sounds or sound baths. Even though they might say otherwise. I've mentioned the danger of sound baths because the people doing them, I don't judge. They're lovely people. I have some close friends that do sound baths, and they're very well intentioned. Unfortunately, they're not certified sound therapists, and they don't understand that if you give somebody the wrong sound, a sound that they have an excess of in the brainwave pattern, you can exacerbate any kind of chronic physical or emotional issue or psychological issue. And every week, probably every week or 10 days, I've got to realign somebody vibrationally that went to a sound bath and got their frequencies screwed up. because, you know, they just wanted to experience it, or curiosity, or they were told they're healing sounds. If you ever do experience healing from relaxing sounds, you know, listening to Tibetan bowls or crystal bowls or bells or tuning forks or anything like that, keep in mind that those are relaxing sounds. They're not healing sounds. And if you had a healing, you should give yourself the credit, not the bells or bowls or forks or anything. Our body is a self-healing mechanism. And when you use sound therapy properly, you're using the ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, properly. And it's an inner process. It's nothing external outside that's going to heal you. I'm all about empowering people. That's why my work in sound therapy is all about giving you the best information possible and empowering you with lessons and consultations and whatever's necessary by phone or in person to give you the answers to your questions and empower you to be a sound healer. Because nowadays, everybody thinks they're a sound healer. They do a workshop or read something online or on Google, and all of a sudden they're a sound healer. And, you know, I'm working with some other elders in the field and some medical doctors to try to create an organization to monitor the ethics and standards of sound healing, which is well needed. I'm not a big fan of organizations. I'm not a joiner, and I join as few organizations as humanly possible. But I do see the need for having an organization to monitor ethics and standards in sound healing, because, like I said, nowadays everybody's, you know, doing sound baths. Everybody's a sound healer, and it's not true, you know, sound healing in most cases. I mean, I don't know the details of everybody's work, but I know from my experience and the people I see every day that got their frequencies messed up by somebody who didn't know what they were doing, or from going to a sound bath. So I have to, you know, undo, you know, when that kind of stuff is done. So anyway, that's my story. So getting back to the principles in the third of this series, which should air this Saturday. I'm recording it a couple days in advance because I've already done the previous two videos, and we're going to try and be live every Saturday. And since I'm not clear on my schedule for this Saturday, we have it scheduled. So you should be watching this. I think it's scheduled for 6 p.m. This Saturday, March 7th. And then, of course, after that, it will be available on Facebook and my website, wayneperry.com. So in any case, we're talking about attention to intention. So let me start by asking you, what is the most important thing you have? Now, I'm not talking about physical belongings. I'm not talking about, you know, how important your house might be, or some of your belongings, or your partner, or anything like that, or your pet. I did a workshop, gosh, it must be 14 or 15 years ago now, in Chicago at this massage therapy school. And we had a full house, a lot of Reiki masters and massage therapists that I trained in sound therapy. And some older lady in the back of the room, when I asked this question, what's the most important thing, most valuable thing that you have to offer? And more or less referring to your abilities or character traits, or, you know, what you have going for yourself. And an older lady in the back raised her hand, and I called upon her, and I said yes. And she said, the most important thing that I have, the most valuable thing, is my grandmother's wedding ring. And so there was a big laugh in the audience. A lot of people laughed. And but, you know, we're not laughing at the lady, you know, I mean, she just simply kind of misunderstood the question. It's hard to get across the specific meaning when you're asking about the most important things people have. But what I'm talking about is your attributes and your, you know, consciousness and in your awareness, not a physical thing or belonging. What do you feel? What do you think is the most important thing that you have? So just think about it for a moment. And if anybody opens the chat bar, you could put it on the chat. You can write me if I can see it. I don't know. I see a blank space here for chats, but you can just hold it in your mind. And I'm not going to keep you holding. I'm going to give you the answer in just a few seconds here, because you know, it's not a two-way street. We're not doing a webinar with immediate feedback here. So have you thought about it? All the things, I mean, if I was asked what's the most important thing that I had and I didn't know the answer, I might say consciousness itself. The fact that we're awake and we're conscious, that's got to be, you know, uh, the most important thing, or one of the most important things we have. Or I might answer the capacity to love. Those are the first two things that would come to my mind, I think, when somebody asked me that question many years ago, is either the capacity to love or the aspect of one's consciousness, because those are obviously vitally important. But the reason why I actually call this the first principle of the 9 core key principles to sound healing, even though this is third in the series, I was moved to, everything I do is done, I'm directed by spirit to do. I don't make any decisions or do anything from the mind or from the ego. Everything that I do is not, reactionary or anything. It's designed and I'm guided by spirit, whatever it is that I do. And I'm immensely grateful to be of service in this way. And I thank God from the morning, from the time that I get up, which sometimes is morning, sometimes afternoon, sometimes evening, depending on my international phone schedule. But I thank God every day, many times a day, with the sound invocation that I did in the last video. And maybe we can squeeze it into this video if we don't go too long, in case you missed the last video, because that sound invocation is very important. And if you don't have my sound invocation, it's in my book, Sound Medicine. And you're welcome to use mine as a gift from the book, or I can, recite it later. Or you can write your own, as I mentioned in the last video. Just be sure you're very, very specific. Specificity is very important in sound healing, and also with your, intentions, to be very specific. So we're already getting ahead of ourselves and talking about intention when I'm trying to talk about attention. So that's the way stream of consciousness works sometimes. They kind of cross wires and interact with each other. And that's part of the holistic process. We're all connected within, and holistic healing is seeing the unification of all these things physically and emotionally that are going on in our body. And if one thing breaks down, if we don't correct it within and properly with harmonizing it and tuning it with sound, then something else will break down, and then something else will break down. And these things are all related. If we don't address the first issue within and correct it properly, then it leads to other imbalances. I talked about this again in my last video when I talked about one of the first major things that I healed with sound therapy about 25 years ago. It's my chronic kidney stones. And I healed that with sound therapy. And I talked about many, many other things that I've healed in the last video. If you didn't get a chance to see it, look for it, and you'll understand more of what I'm saying. But right now, I'm talking about just asking you, what's the most powerful thing that you have? Okay, so now that you've had plenty of time to think about it, I'm going to give you the answer. And the reason why I put this in front of the invocation, because for years I had prayer and invocation as number one, because it's important to always put God first before ourselves and before others. It's very vital to always put spirit first. We're just a conduit and a vehicle and a channel for spirit to operate through. So we shouldn't be so presumptuous as to think that we're doing the healing all by ourselves or something. It's really, we're just kind of facilitating the healing. It's spirit that really does the healing, and your body. Our bodies are self-healing mechanisms if they're given a sound environment. All puns intended. Okay, so if you thought about your answer, I don't know what your answer is because I can't hear you, but I'm going to tell you why I put this first, even before the invocation. Not because it's more important than God. God, spirit is number one, but because you can't use or put God first unless you put this first. And that's the power of your attention. And that's why this talk is on attention and intention, attention to intention, but it starts with attention. So if you think about it, everybody's looking for our attention, is trying to get your attention. And so that's why it's so vital, and why it has to come before the invocation and prayer. That's actually the second in the core key principles of sound therapy. First is the power of attention, because you can't put your attention into God unless you focus your attention. You can't put your attention into love unless you focus your attention. You can't put your attention into healing or another person or into your own body unless you focus your attention. So focused attention is the first principle in sound therapy. So really understand how much power you have in your attention. And then remember the related universal principles. And the first one says, where your attention goes, energy flows. Okay? And energy is the same thing as sound, frequency, vibration, pulsation. The good news is people are understanding that everything is energy now. And there's no such thing as solid matter. It's kind of illusionary. A better word for solid matter is density. The higher the density, or I should say, the less density, the higher the frequency. The more density, the lower the frequency. And until you've trained your mind to substitute the word density for solidity, if it helps you, you can think in terms of solidity. The more solid something is, like a floor, a wall, or a table, the lower the frequency is. It has very, very little frequency, very low frequency, way, way below the hearing range. Okay, because that's heavy density, that kind of illusion of solidity. It's actually just very massive density. And the less density, like when we're talking about the blood and fluids in the body, which is the highest physical frequency because it's amorphous. And when we have amorphous energy, it's a higher frequency than the bones and teeth and muscles. And again, I talked about this in one of the previous videos, so I don't want to stray into that too much. So you want to understand that your power of attention is very, very useful and extremely powerful. If you just think about it, I mean, everybody wants your attention. If you have kids, your parents, you know what your kids want. They want your attention. Mommy, mommy, daddy, daddy, look, look. I'm a father. I know what this is about. So the kids want our attention. And then when our parents get old, what do they need? Our attention. They're older, they're getting on in years, and they need maybe some support or at least your attention and love. So we can see it around us in our immediate family, how kids need our attention, how elderly people need our attention. And then you look out into the world, you can't drive down the street. I live like 2 blocks from Sunset Boulevard in West Hollywood, and you can't drive down not only Sunset Boulevard, but that's an easy example to use, where there's billboards in every block, advertising the latest movies, the latest deodorant, the latest whatever it is. And because people are trying to get your attention while you're driving. So if you think about, the psychology of advertising, it's all about getting your attention. And so it might be billboards, it could be TV ads, radio ads, it could be, they used to use those signs in the sky, a plane or a blimp pulling signs to get your attention because we look in the sky, you don't see too much advertising in the sky, so it's a good way to advertise and get your attention. So you could go on and on. We see things on the side of buildings, we see signs on benches at bus stops. I mean, it's endless. People wanting to get our attention. So appreciate how valuable your attention is and monitor who you're giving your valuable attention to. This is very, important. You want to give your attention to that which will serve you well. And so when you put your attention into sound and you learn the principles of sound therapy and how easy it is and how inexpensive it is, then you're way ahead of the game, because like I said before, where your attention goes, energy flows. And another little related saying or principle to that is where your attention goes, it expands, energy expands in light of where your attention is. You could say what you focus on expands. So when what you focus on expands, we're talking about our attention, and that energy expands. And so value your attention and put it into the proper things. Don't get distracted by things that aren't going to serve you well. When I teach my students after they do a sound analysis, I tell them exactly what to do, how many minutes to listen to some harmonics and tones. And that's the therapeutic stuff that goes into the body, like food goes in. And it serves as brainwave entrainment. And it's mutual phase locking of your brainwave patterns. And it puts back what's weak or missing. So it's vitally important. And I talked about the example of how music is a great example in understanding entrainment. You have songs stuck in your head that you remember from childhood. So if you remember stuff from childhood, you can understand that sound doesn't go away. It doesn't disappear. It's in your brain forever. So instead of putting unhealthy sound, a lot of electronic noise or sounds that aren't going to be necessarily healthy or beneficial for you, why not try putting some healthy harmonics and overtones into the areas of your brain where it's needed? In a sound analysis, we can see exactly what pitches are weak and need support. And it's really simple. And you just listen to a few minutes every day. And we're all busy people. We don't want to be given homework that's going to take us a lot of time. And this doesn't take any time. You can do it while you're on the computer. You can do it while you're driving down the street in your car. You can do it while you're exercising, while you're having lunch. So it's so simple. I don't understand why millions of people aren't doing sound healing. Eventually they will, probably not in my lifetime, but like Edgar Cayce said in 1952, sound will be the medicine of the future. And guess what? The future is now. That's why this is happening, and people are waking up to sound, remembering who they really are. Your body consists of sound. I've talked about this in previous videos. I'm not going to talk about it now because I want to keep this video more brief than the last one. So we'll talk about it maybe in the next video or future video. I'll explain exactly how your body consists of sound so you can easily wrap your mind around it. But right now, I want to move on from attention. Hopefully you understand the power of your attention. There's a reason why everybody wants it, why advertisers want it, why your parents want it, why your kids want it, and everybody's grappling for your attention. It's very powerful. So be selective and be mentally and emotionally disciplined to put your attention in what will serve you, what will make you happier and healthier. So that's the essence of what I want to say about attention. And of course, reminding you that what you focus on expands, and where your attention goes, energy flows. And that's what we want, right? We want that energy to flow in deeper and higher directions. And so that brings us to the next principle. So I'm actually covering two principles in this part 3 of this series. And the second principle is intention. Now, I said I'm not going to talk a lot about this because, there's people have been talking about this. I remember in the mid 90s, I think it was around the first time, I don't know, the early 90s or mid 90s, I think was the first time I started being aware of intention in healing and how important it is to be specific and focused on what your intention is, what you want to heal. I'd have my workshops and I'd ask people, what's your intention? There's a little paperwork that they fill out at the beginning of the workshop. And what do you want to release, change, transform, or heal? And be specific about it. And then the next question is, what's standing in the way of preventing you from achieving that, having that in your life? And then the third question is, what's the payoff? What is it that you're doing or receiving right now that may be taking up your attention or distracting you from your deepest and highest intention? So, there's things like that I ask private clients and people in my workshop to get clear, to help them get clear if they're not clear on what their purpose is or what their intention is at this particular point in their life. So if you set that intention with clarity and be very specific, because in my workshop, I'd have people, we go around the circle and somebody will say, oh, I want to be happy. I want to be more successful in my career and in my relationships. Well, who doesn't? That's not specificity. Who doesn't want to be happy? Who doesn't want to be happy in their relationships and in their career? You need to be specific to not be afraid to be vulnerable and say, I want to get over my poor eating habits or something like that. I want to release my attachment to animal foods or something like that, and have a more plant-based diet. I mean, that might be one of your intentions, or your intention might be to uh, to have better relationships. So then talk about communication, that your intention is to be able to communicate your feelings more openly and honestly, and an intention to find somebody like-minded that's open and ready and open for a relationship, or has the same goals and interests that you do. If you have higher consciousness goals or spiritual aspirations or something like that. So be specific about what it is that you want. Is it financial? Then be specific about if it's money that you need to build on and have in your life, or the things that money can bring you. Usually it's not the money itself, it's what you want to do with that money, and having the freedom to act or to be on a higher level in your career, perhaps, or whatever it might be. So it's important to be very specific about your intention in sound therapy and sound healing, because the more focused you are and the more energy you put into your intention under the banner of your attention. Of course, first you have to realize that where your attention goes, energy flows, and really heighten and focus and concentrate your attention, and then have a very clear intention with the steps involved, and just learn to get focused, and edit yourself if you need to, write things down, record yourself, listen back to it. These are helpful tools that I've done in the past when I was writing my book, Sound Medicine. And so that's all there is to it. We don't really need to talk much more about intention. What I'd rather spend the last few minutes talking about is give you three for the price of one. I'm going to throw in a third principle here. So the first one was attention, and the second was intention. And so we've covered those. It's not that complicated to cover the specificity of how powerful your attention is and how specific your intention is. But what I think is even more powerful than intention, because we all know how powerful intention is and how important it is. But this next principle sort of gets short shrifted, and that, I think, is even more important than intention, and that's commitment. See, a lot of people shy away from that word commitment, whether in relationships or in work or in their personal life, doing their exercises or eating better or whatever it might be. There's a commitment involved. And I've always said, in my workshops, and I used to say, and people say, do you have that written somewhere? And I said, well, it's in my book, Sound Medicine. But I eventually wrote something up, and I've posted it a number of times on Facebook. But it starts off by emphasizing the power of commitment in your intention if you want to heal. In fact, I think I have it handy here, because I can remember the first part of it, but I can tell you that it starts with your life is a healing process. So you're healing, whether you look at the big picture of your life or whether you're looking at a specific healing endeavor, a specific healing intention. See, we all know people with the best of intentions, right? Especially in LA. When I came out here from the Midwest, in the Midwest, people tend to honor their commitments and agreements more normally, or more specifically. And when I come out to California, it was all this, oh yeah, let's do lunch, and lunch never happens, or my girl will call your girl, or all this kind of flimsy lack of commitment was kind of startling to me at first, until I realized sort of like a different consciousness out here in California or in LA. I mean, I don't like to generalize, because I'm sure there's a lot of loving, disciplined people that have very clear intentions and are very good about it. But, I learned how to deal with it in my own life and in my own business. And so I always recommend to people that you're healing, whatever it is. Like I said, if it's the big picture of your life or a specific healing endeavor, your healing will be successful in direct proportion to the agreements and the commitments that you make and keep, both with yourself and with others. So I'm going to repeat that one more time. This is vitally important. Is if you want your healing to work and be lasting, uh, it's very important that you honor your agreements and commitments to yourself and to others. Even the little things like, closing the door or putting down the toilet seat or doing your exercises or, not doing something that you know is not good to do or eating better. They're small. They start out with small things, but they add up and they eat at your integrity and your personal power. If you start letting these agreements that you make with yourself slide and you don't honor them. And I'll share the rest of this little saying that's in my book, Sound Medicine, because in addition to keeping your agreements, commitments with yourself and others, it's also important that you're one pointed in your focus and clarity of intention. Define and visualize your issue and the results you wish to obtain. It's also important in your personal life that you live in integrity with yourself by practicing and developing mental and emotional discipline over anything that takes you out of the present moment. The now moment is infinite and divine if you live in it with faith that everything happens for our upliftment at the perfect time. And I totally believe this. This actually literally saved my life when I came out of a 30-day coma in 2011 and was so near death coming out of this coma. And in fact, I wanted to die. I was so in pain and so sick, and I lost so much from losing my house and all my belongings and everything. I didn't want to go on in this dimension. And then I had an aha moment where the nurse brought me my own book, and I was flipping through it, and then I saw this line, which probably all familiar with, but it hit me. I wrote it, but I had forgotten it because I was feeling like a victim. I was in such pain and overwhelmed by losing, my belongings and my house and so much and money. $10,000 was stolen from me, and I slipped into this victim consciousness that we don't have to do unless we choose to. And then I realized this next line that I'm going to share with you, and that's that. Everything happens for upliftment at the perfect time, what I just said. It's a simple statement, but everything happens for upliftment. Nothing happens to us. Everything happens for us. If we can remember this, that I remember that, well, I'll never forget it now, but I got so far afield with all the stuff that I went through and all the pain that I went through. I forgot that very simple truth that everything happens for upliftment. And then I got rid of those thoughts of wanting to be out of this dimension and was fed up with the oppression and the struggle and all the hatred and negativity. And I'm such a sensitive person. I pick up on all this stuff, and I just, I want it out. And I still want out. I'm going out. So this is my last incarnation, thank God. But at the same time, I really appreciate the fact that everything happens for our upliftment, absolutely everything. So that's a part of this little thing related to our intention that I wrote. And just to finish the last part of it, everything happens for upliftment at the perfect time. And there's never pain in love, only in ego and attachment. And finally, and most importantly, healing and upliftment is not achieved by any of us personally. It occurs when we totally surrender to love or God, same thing, 100%, not 99%. That's how I lived most of my life. I thought I was a spiritual person, but I was like 90% with spirit. I was holding on that 10% based upon my past experience and my ego. And so it led me to realize that I had control issues because I couldn't let go of that 10%. It was too scary. I had to have some control over my life. I couldn't give it all to God. At least that's what I was in denial about, is that I can't, surrender 100%. I have to have some free will. Well, we didn't sacrifice my free will. Actually, we don't have as much free will as we think we have anyway. It's better described as conditioned free will, because all our choices are predicated upon our past, millions of past decisions that lead us up to the current decisions that we think are so free. But that's a topic for another video. It's a vast topic that we'll talk about another time. But anyway, my point is is that we are in this now moment, which is the only moment that exists. And if we can just stay in that moment, it's an infinite moment. It's really beautiful. And everything in this world is unfolding perfectly. I see the perfection in it when I choose to. Instead of worrying about who's in the White House or who's controlling things politically or all this stuff and getting freaked out about it, it doesn't concern me at all, because, I work for God. That's who's really in charge. These other people, politicians, might think they have so much power, but they don't have a whit of power compared to the power of spirit and the power of God and the power of love. So keep your faith in that, please. So did I share the rest of it? Well, almost the last sentence I was sharing with you is that most importantly, healing and upliftment is not achieved by any of us personally. It occurs when we totally, not 99%, but 100% surrender to love, to God, to spirit, get ourselves out of the way and become an open conduit for this divine blessing. And that's what healing is all about, is getting out of the way. It took me probably about 4 or 5 years to learn that. And when I started working as a certified sound therapist, I was so into the technology in my left brain and having my little tuner there when I had somebody on my healing table, making sure that I was only giving them the frequencies that they were weak in, and doing release sounds and only the frequencies that they had an excess of in their brainwave pattern. I was so dedicated and committed to doing the right thing. Then sounds sometimes seemed like they were pulling me in a different direction. I always would ignore them for a few years. And then one time I decided, well, I don't know why I'm distracted by these sounds, but let me follow them and see where they're leading me. And I did that once, and the sounds led me exactly to where I needed to go to help this lady that I had on my sound healing table. And she had a profound healing, and I did as well. It taught me a very valuable lesson, and that's that sound always goes where it's needed. We can be in charge of the sound to, varying degrees. We need to, kind of be in control to some extent to know what we're doing and to help people in that way. But I was a little bit too much into the, research and the technology and doing what I was doing with good intention. But I was missing something, and that's the fact that sound will always go where it's needed if you get out of the way and you learn to understand sound and understand how it leads us and where it's going and why it's going there. And you just get deeper into your sound experience. Then at some point, you kind of surrender to the sound, just like surrendering to God and spirit. It guides you, and you're safe, and you don't have to have any fear. It's all about love. The opposite to love is not hatred, it's fear. The opposite to love is fear. So don't be afraid. Live in the love and follow your intentions with commitment. So that's our topic for today. I want to bring this to a close and not go a whole hour, and give you time to review this video if you can. I just want to mention before closing out that I like to close with some regenerative sound, but we're going to skip that to keep this short this time. But remind me if you're interested. I'll demonstrate some regenerative sound and harmonics at the end of the next video. And so I just want to remind you that we have our next workshop May 30th and 31st in Los Angeles. And I'm happy to come to any city if it's not convenient for you to come to Los Angeles. And you can pull 10 or 12 people together in whatever town you live in, wherever it is, in the United States, Canada, Europe. I mean, I travel all over the world. I've done this workshop in countries abroad in Europe and Asia. And so keep that in mind if you get some people together, and that if you're interested in this work and you want to develop it, I offer a certificate in sound healing for the 2-day weekend intensive. It's very experiential, hands-on workshop. You'll learn a ton of stuff. In the meantime, if you can't attend the workshop, go to my website, wayneperry.com, and there's a wealth of information there. And a lot of testimonials on the testimonial page. On the blog page, there's articles, some that I've written, some that others have written about me or my work. There's also the, of course, products and services pages. But the video page has at least a dozen or more free to view videos that you can learn a lot from it. It doesn't cost you anything. So keep all this in mind, and you can watch this video and the other videos that I've done on Facebook at the Sound Therapy Center of Los Angeles, or my timeline, Wayne Perry. And my email and phone number is on my website, wayneperry.com. If you'd like to schedule an appointment for a diagnostic sound analysis in person in Los Angeles, or over the phone from anywhere in the world, in the United States, Europe, or Asia, send me an email, or you can call me on Facebook Messenger. That's usually where we do the sound analysis on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger. And it's a very easy process. And it includes a lot more than the sound analysis. It includes your hand-done chart, an instructional sheet on what to do, like a sonic prescription, and a toning lesson at the end, and how to do release toning work and release blockages from your brainwave pattern. So it's a very comprehensive 90-minute session, and it's only $185. So for 90 minutes, and all you need after you do that is maybe my book, Sound Medicine, and some downloads, and that's it. You're good to go. You don't have to spend thousands of dollars like I did on a sound machine, or spend thousands of dollars on multiple programs, or on drugs, or any other expensive external thing. Empower yourself with sound. Discover your unique personal signature frequency pattern, and then you can pretty much do anything with sound, and do it properly, not in the way people are talking about doing it, with bowls and bells and tuning forks and all this stuff, which is just external stuff. It's not inner stuff dealing with the ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, and your brainwave pattern that stores all your information is in your brainwave pattern. So hopefully you learned about brainwave entrainment on the previous video, the importance of prayer and invocation in the last video, and this time we talked about, and even though this is a shorter video, we squeezed in 4 principles: the principle of attention and intention, and then we also talked about the power of commitment, and also the power of prayer and invocation. And we'll get to the rest of the principles and more on the future videos. So I'll be endeavoring to do it on Saturdays. Probably I'm aiming for 6 p.m. Pacific time every Saturday to do a live stream. So we'll see how that goes. If it changes my travel schedule or something, I'll let you know ahead of time if we have to change the time. But watch for the regular videos. I'm also going to be shortening. This one is less than an hour, and some of the upcoming ones will probably be only maybe 30 minutes or even less, once I get the bulk of this important information out there to you. And then I'll be giving you reminders. And if you give me feedback on what you'd like me to talk about, what you'd like to know about sound therapy, about vocal toning and overtoning and harmonics, just let me know. So thank you for tuning in. I appreciate you sharing the most valuable thing that you have, your attention. It's not a light thing. So I appreciate you giving me your attention. And remember, if the eyes are the windows to the soul, the voice is surely the door to the heart. And love in your heart wasn't put there to stay. Love isn't love till you give it away. Until we touch again. Tone daily. Love you.